The weight of a nation rested on President Ibrahim Traoré's shoulders, a burden he carried with a quiet resolve that had come to define his leadership in Burkina Faso. One morning, the usual calm of his office, typically filled with the rustle of policy reports and strategic plans, was broken by the arrival of an aide, his expression urgent. The news he delivered was stark. The United States government was repatriating a significant number of individuals to Burkina Faso, many of them young Burkinabe who had ventured abroad years ago, chasing dreams of better opportunities. At first, the announcement seemed like another ripple in the turbulent waters of global politics, a statistic among many. But as President Traoré absorbed the information, a deeper disquiet settled in his heart. These weren't just numbers. They were his people. Young souls who had once left their homeland, full of hope, were now being returned, many with little to show for their years of striving, caught in a painful limbo between two worlds. He knew their stories, or could imagine them vividly, the struggle against discrimination, the gnawing isolation, the relentless economic hardships that had shadowed their lives in a foreign land. Some, undoubtedly, had carved out successes, but many more had been left adrift, their dreams of a welcoming home, a home they now barely remembered, fading with each passing year. The official narrative might frame it as a return to roots, but Traoré knew that for many it would feel like a sentence, a public declaration of failure, leaving them with a crushing sense of having nowhere to truly belong. As the leader of Burkina Faso, Traoré understood the immense challenge this presented. He couldn't, and wouldn't, reduce these returning citizens to mere entries in a demographic ledger. They were Burkinabe, and he was determined they would not return to a homeland that offered them no future, no hope. But where some might see a burden, Traoré began to see a reservoir of untapped potential. These young people were not failures. They were a resource. Their experiences, however difficult, had forged in them skills, resilience, and a worldly perspective that Burkina Faso desperately needed. They were returning with knowledge, with dreams reshaped by adversity, elements that could be pivotal in the nation's journey towards strength and self-sufficiency. "I will welcome them back with open arms," Traoré resolved, his gaze fixed on a point beyond his office walls, envisioning a different future. "We cannot allow our youth to be casualties of a broken system, pawns in geopolitical games. We will transform this challenge into a triumph, not just for Burkina Faso, but as a beacon for all of Africa." His mind, always agile, began to race, sketching out ideas, strategies for integrating these returning citizens, for harnessing their potential. The path would be arduous. He harbored no illusions about that. The entrenched corruption of previous administrations had left the nation fragile, its resources plundered, its spirit tested. Yet, he also held an unshakable conviction. Burkina Faso's true wealth, its most potent force for change, lay in its youth. This repatriation, initially a source of concern, was morphing into an unprecedented opportunity. A chance for these young people to become architects of the very nation they had once felt compelled to leave. Little did Ibrahim Traoré know then, this decision, this compassionate stance, would become a defining moment of his presidency, igniting a flame of hope for thousands and offering them the purpose they had been so cruelly denied for so long. The day the first group of repatriated Burkinabe was scheduled to arrive, the air at Ouagadougou International Airport was thick with a complex tapestry of emotions. A nervous excitement rippled through some of the returnees, a flicker of hope for a homecoming. But for many others, anxiety was the dominant note, a profound uncertainty about the reception and the future that awaited them. Years had passed since they last set foot on Burkinabe soil. Some had built new lives, however precarious. Others had constantly battled to find their footing. Now, they were being sent back to a land that felt simultaneously familiar and alien, a place of childhood memories overlaid with the anxieties of an unknown present. Amidst this charged atmosphere, President Ibrahim Traoré arrived, not as a distant head of state, but as the embodiment of the hope and unity he tirelessly championed. He was a leader who walked among his people, who listened, who understood their struggles because he had witnessed them, felt them. He knew the sting of uncertainty, the yearning for a brighter future. And in that pivotal moment, as the aircraft doors opened and the first young people began to disembark, he made a silent vow to them, a vow that would irrevocably alter the trajectory of their lives. With a reassuring smile, President Traoré walked towards them, his arms open in a gesture of genuine welcome. "Welcome home," his voice resonated, strong and imbued with a warmth that cut through the apprehension. "You are not here as failures. You are not a burden to this nation." He paused, his eyes meeting theirs, conveying a sincerity that was palpable. "You are our future. You are our most valuable resource, and you will help us build the new Burkina Faso." The young people stared, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had braced themselves for condemnation, for indifference, perhaps for pity. They had expected to be seen as a problem to be managed. But the president's words were a balm to their weary souls, words of encouragement, of inherent worth, of boundless possibility. "Many of you left in search of a better life," Traoré continued, his voice steady, "and in that pursuit, you have gained experience, knowledge, and skills that are invaluable. This nation, Burkina Faso, needs you. Africa needs you." Tears welled in the eyes of some, the unexpected affirmation releasing pent-up emotions. He didn't shy away from the harsh realities. "For too long, many African politicians have failed you, have failed all of us," he declared, his tone hardening. "They have been corrupt, self-serving, devoid of shame, stealing from our own people, leaving our nations impoverished. But I tell you today, that era is ending. We will work together, tirelessly, to ensure that no Burkinabe ever feels compelled to leave their home in search of dignity and opportunity." His words struck a deep chord within the repatriates. The pain of displacement, of being othered in a foreign land, was a burden they had carried for years. Now, here stood their leader, not only acknowledging their ordeal, but also seeing them as integral to the nation's healing and its future. It wasn't mere rhetoric. President Traoré had already initiated significant reforms, tackling poverty and corruption head-on. His actions lent weight to his promises. "I promise you," he pledged, his voice ringing with conviction, "I will work with you, alongside you, to create jobs, to build schools, to provide health care. You will not be left behind. You will be the vanguards, the leaders of the new Burkina Faso." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a genuine sense of hope blossomed in the hearts of the returned youth. They had arrived under a cloud of uncertainty, and now they were being welcomed into the dawn of a new beginning, not just for themselves, but for their homeland. As a crowd began to gather, drawn by the president's powerful presence, it felt as if the entire future of Burkina Faso was converging on that tarmac, embodied in the hopeful faces of its once-forgotten children. President Traoré's vision was clear. He believed in his people, and he knew, with unshakable faith, that together they would rebuild their nation. In the weeks and months that followed President Traoré's heartfelt airport welcome, the repatriated youth began the challenging process of settling back into life in Burkina Faso. The transition was not without its hurdles. For many, the nation they had returned to was a landscape of half-forgotten memories, significantly changed from their childhood recollections, or entirely new for those who had left at a very young age. Yet, amidst the readjustment, a current of palpable energy began to flow, largely fueled by President Traoré's unwavering commitment. He had made promises of jobs, education, and opportunity, and he was resolute in seeing them through. A few days after their arrival, Traoré gathered the young repatriates in a spacious community hall. He stood before them, not as a distant figurehead, but as a leader ready to share a clear, actionable vision. "You are not here merely to occupy space," he stated, his voice firm yet infused with purpose. "You are the architects who will rebuild this country. We possess the collective power to transform Burkina Faso, but this transformation hinges on our unified effort. You bring with you invaluable skills, diverse knowledge, and innovative ideas that are crucial for our nation's advancement. The future is, quite literally, in your hands." The young men and women listened with rapt attention. Many had returned harboring minimal expectations, fearing they would once again be relegated to the margins, left to struggle for scraps of opportunity. But Traoré's words painted a different picture, one of empowerment and shared responsibility. He wasn't just offering vague hope, he was presenting a blueprint for success. As he moved through the hall, speaking with individuals, he saw the spark of excitement ignite in their eyes. These were people who had studied in various fields abroad, worked in diverse industries, and amassed a wealth of experience. Now, they had the chance to channel all they had learned into the resurgence of their homeland. Some were agricultural experts, others tech innovators, many poised to revitalize the nation's education system. To translate this vision into reality, Traoré introduced a groundbreaking national program, Future Builders. It was a large-scale initiative meticulously designed to create meaningful employment for the youth, especially the repatriates, focusing on critical sectors like infrastructure development, industrial expansion, and educational investment. Traoré had long understood that for Burkina Faso to achieve genuine prosperity, it had to build from within, leveraging the talents and expertise of its own people. The government machinery moved with uncharacteristic speed, actively recruiting the repatriated citizens for a multitude of projects. Roads were being paved, bridges constructed, schools renovated, and hospitals upgraded. Those who had once felt abandoned, adrift in foreign lands, now felt an invigorating sense of being needed, of having a tangible purpose. President Traoré made it a point to ensure that every willing young person had a role to play, a job waiting for them. He didn't remain confined to his office. He was frequently seen at project sites, personally monitoring progress, speaking with workers, his leadership style consistently people-centric. The citizens of Burkina Faso were his undisputed priority. Gradually, the tangible results of this concerted effort began to emerge. New roads snaked across the landscape, connecting remote communities. Schools buzzed with renewed energy and improved facilities. Hospitals saw crucial investments in equipment and staffing. The young repatriates, initially uncertain, began to witness the direct impact of their labor, realizing their contributions were not just building structures, but actively bettering lives. They weren't just working, they were co-creating a nation grounded in dignity, opportunity, and a burgeoning sense of equality. Among the first to embrace the Future Builders program was Aminata, a bright young woman who had earned her engineering degree in the United States. Upon her return, she confessed to an initial feeling of disconnect, unsure how her sophisticated skills would translate to the realities of Burkina Faso. Soon, however, she was leading a team on a pivotal project, the construction of a new bridge designed to link isolated rural communities with the capital, granting them vital access to markets, healthcare, and broader economic participation. "I never imagined I'd return and make such a tangible difference," Aminata shared with President Traoré one evening as they stood surveying the nearly completed bridge silhouetted against the sunset. "But now, I see I'm not just helping to change infrastructure. I'm helping to change lives, including my own." Traoré smiled, a deep sense of pride in his eyes. "You're building more than a bridge, Aminata," he replied. "You're helping to build the very future of Burkina Faso." A wave of national pride began to swell. The repatriated youth were no longer perceived as outsiders or a burden. They were celebrated as vital contributors, the catalysts for a new era. They had returned with the intellectual capital and practical skills to propel Burkina Faso forward. The promises Ibrahim Traoré had made were materializing, and the nation, slowly but surely, was beginning to rise. However, this transformative journey was not without its shadowed valleys. The deep roots of corruption, a legacy of past kleptocratic regimes, remained a persistent struggle in certain sectors. Not everyone in positions of influence was pleased with the sweeping changes Traoré was implementing. Some politicians and entrenched bureaucrats, who had long benefited from the old systems of patronage and mismanagement, saw his reforms as a direct assault on their illicit gains and established power structures. They began to subtly, then more overtly, try to undermine his efforts. But Ibrahim Traoré was resolute. His commitment to his people and his vision for a self-reliant Burkina Faso was unwavering. "You may attempt to obstruct us," he often declared to his inner circle, his voice calm but firm. "But our movement is forward. We will not regress. We will not permit our nation to fall back into the clutches of those who prioritize personal greed over the people's welfare." With each passing day, as the nation advanced, the hope and faith of the populace grew, a stark contrast to the machinations of the disgruntled few. The young repatriates, once lost and adrift, had found their anchor, their purpose, in a country that was finally offering them a tangible stake in its future. A future they were building with their own hands, their own dreams, their own tireless efforts. As Traoré surveyed the flurry of constructive activity, the dedication of the youth, he knew his vision was steadily becoming reality. This was merely the dawn. The future was bright. The accelerating progress in Burkina Faso, however, cast long shadows in the corridors of entrenched power. President Traoré's bold moves, his relentless anti-corruption drive, and his unwavering emphasis on national self-reliance deeply unsettled powerful figures within the political establishment, many of whom had long-standing, lucrative ties to the old, exploitative ways. They perceived Traoré's burgeoning success and his growing popularity not as a national triumph, but as an existential threat to their privileged positions and shadowy enterprises. Behind the ornate doors of private villas and in hushed clandestine meetings, a conspiracy began to fester. Some of the most influential personalities within the government, individuals with deep connections to Western powers who preferred a more pliable African leadership, started to plot Traoré's downfall. They bristled at his audacity in reshaping the country, his defiant challenge to the neo-colonial status quo, and his passionate advocacy for African self-sufficiency. Their goal was clear: weaken him, discredit his administration, and ultimately remove him. But President Traoré was no naive idealist. His journey to leadership had been fraught with peril, teaching him invaluable, if harsh, lessons about the duplicity of politics. He had learned to discern the menace behind a sycophantic smile, the treachery in an eagerly extended hand. He was acutely aware of the political chess games being played in the shadows and understood that his enemies, both internal and external, would stop at nothing. His own cousin, a man who had once stood shoulder to shoulder with him during the early days of his revolutionary ascent, had recently been flagged in intelligence reports. Overheard in secretive phone conversations, his cousin was allegedly conferring with individuals known for their ties to foreign interests hostile to Traoré's agenda. The president had once placed immense trust in him, a bond forged in shared struggle. Now, the tendrils of doubt were coiling around that trust. The specter of betrayal, one of the deepest cuts a leader can endure, was beginning to materialize. Traoré had already narrowly survived one assassination attempt earlier in his career. The question of whether he would weather this insidious political conspiracy loomed large. He wasn't certain, but one thing was absolute: he would not back down. Late one evening, the atmosphere in President Traoré's office was heavy with unspoken anxieties. He had summoned his most trusted advisors, a small circle of individuals whose loyalty had been tested and proven. "There are elements within our own government," Traoré began, his voice a low, steady rumble that did little to conceal the cold fury in his eyes, "actively working to sabotage everything we have fought to build. They believe they can play a double game, feigning allegiance to the people while secretly serving foreign masters and their own greed. But I will not allow them to destroy what we have sacrificed so much to achieve. We cannot afford naivety. We must act, and act decisively." Commander Diarra, his seasoned and fiercely loyal security chief, nodded in grim agreement. "We have been monitoring several individuals, Mr. President," Diarra confirmed. "The whispers are growing louder. There's talk of a coup being orchestrated, led by figures with demonstrable links to certain Western interests. And it pains me to report this, but the intelligence strongly suggests your cousin may indeed be involved in these discussions, perhaps even playing a significant role." A wave of profound weariness washed over Traoré as he absorbed Diarra's report. His cousin, the man he had considered a brother, a confidant in the labyrinthine world of politics. The thought that this same man could betray him, betray their shared vision, betray Burkina Faso, struck him with the force of a physical blow. It was one thing to anticipate enmity from external powers whose interests were threatened. It was another, far more bitter reality to confront betrayal from within his own blood, his own trusted circle. After a long, heavy silence, Traoré spoke, his voice laced with a steely resolve that belied the turmoil within. "We have to move quickly. We cannot allow this conspiracy to take root and fester. If they imagine they can turn the people against this government, against the progress we are making, they are gravely mistaken. We will expose them for the traitors they are before they can inflict irreparable damage. We must act now. Time is a luxury we do not have." Immediately, Traoré's security team galvanized into action, fanning out to gather more concrete intelligence on the suspected plotters. Calls were traced, movements shadowed, and informants cultivated, all with the aim of meticulously assembling the evidence needed to dismantle the conspiracy and reveal its architects. The investigation painted an even more troubling picture than initially feared. Several high-ranking officials within Traoré's administration were not merely disgruntled, they were actively collaborating with foreign agents, including operatives with clear ties to the French government, to undermine his leadership and derail Burkina Faso's assertive push towards genuine independence. The conspiracy, Traoré realized, was deeper and more insidious than a simple power grab. It was about control, about ensuring Burkina Faso remained tethered to external influences, its resources ripe for exploitation. For these conspirators, Traoré's vision of a self-sufficient, truly independent Africa was an anathema. The moment of confrontation with his cousin was fraught with a heavy, suffocating tension. The man, when faced with the evidence, initially denied everything, his eyes shifting, his voice lacking conviction. He mumbled about being misled, about having different ideas for the country's path. But the guilt was a palpable aura around him, and Traoré could see through the flimsy facade. The bond of trust, once so strong, lay shattered, irreparable. The evidence was overwhelming, damning. "I'm sorry, Ibrahim," his cousin finally whispered, unable to meet Traoré's piercing gaze. I thought I was trying to protect you, to protect our people, in my own way." Traoré's voice, when he responded, was devoid of warmth, as cold and hard as tempered steel. "You were never protecting us. You were protecting yourself, your ambitions, and the interests of those who wish to keep us subjugated. You placed your personal agenda above the destiny of our people, above the sovereignty of our nation. That, my cousin, is unforgivable." The betrayal cut deep, a fresh wound atop old scars, but Traoré knew sentimentality had no place when the nation's future hung in the balance. Disloyalty, especially at such a high level, could not be allowed to fester. It had to be excised, swiftly and publicly. Within days, the elaborate plan to undermine President Ibrahim Traoré and destabilize Burkina Faso was systematically thwarted. The conspirators, his cousin among them, were decisively removed from their positions of power. A thorough investigation was launched into their illicit dealings with foreign agents, and the unvarnished truth of their treachery was laid bare before the people of Burkina Faso. The nation watched, first in shock, then in anger, and finally, with a renewed sense of solidarity with the leader who had once again defended their hope for a truly independent and prosperous future. The first major internal challenge had been met, but the echoes of this betrayal would linger, a stark reminder of the constant vigilance required to safeguard their hard-won progress. In the aftermath of exposing the conspiracy and dismantling the attempted coup, a heavy silence descended upon Ouagadougou, quickly followed by a surge of renewed determination. President Ibrahim Traoré knew this victory, while significant, was but a single battle in a protracted war for Burkina Faso's soul. The political elite who had sought his downfall, though removed from their official capacities, were not so easily vanquished. Many still wielded considerable influence, maintained powerful connections abroad, and possessed the means to sow discord. Traoré understood that his adversaries would not simply concede defeat. They would regroup, seek new alliances, and inevitably continue their insidious efforts to destabilize his government and halt the nation's march towards self-reliance. The weight of this constant vigilance settled upon him, yet outwardly Traoré showed no weakness. The future of Burkina Faso, the trust of its people, hinged on his steadfast leadership. The nation had traversed too far, sacrificed too much, to allow corruption and betrayal to unravel their collective progress. He had promised his people tangible change, a departure from the plundered past, and he would not falter. The ensuing weeks saw an intensification of effort. Traoré doubled down on his economic agenda, his focus keenly aimed at creating sustainable opportunities for the youth so long neglected by previous regimes. The Future Builders program, already a symbol of hope, was launched into its next ambitious phase. Thousands more young Burkinabé, including a steady stream of repatriates now viewed as pioneers, were integrated into the workforce. Armed with purpose and the tools for success, they became the driving force behind the nation's infrastructural and agricultural transformation. Roads extended further, new schools opened their doors in remote regions, and local industries, powered by fresh ideas and skills, began to flourish. With their direct involvement, Burkina Faso was visibly and tangibly becoming a country on the ascent, a place where its citizens could dream of and build a prosperous future without the desperate need to seek it on foreign shores. However, the political climate across West Africa remained volatile. President Traoré's enemies, particularly those in neighboring states with vested interests tied to Western powers, quietly continued their campaign to isolate and undermine him. His unwavering vision for a truly free, independent, and self-sufficient Africa was a direct challenge to the long-established neo-colonial order, an order that thrived on Africa's dependency. This made him a dangerous man in the eyes of those who profited from the continent's subjugation. One evening, as Traoré conferred with his most trusted advisors, an urgent intelligence report landed on his desk. It detailed a sophisticated plot for another coup attempt, more intricate than the last. This time, the orchestration allegedly involved not only persistent foreign interests, but also certain disaffected figures within the African Union itself, individuals unhappy with Traoré's growing influence and his refusal to play by the old rules. He had long suspected that some regional leaders paid lip service to unity while secretly working to maintain a status quo that benefited them personally. Now, the shadowy outlines of this new conspiracy were sharpening. A grim resolve settled on Traoré's face. "I will not let Burkina Faso fall," he declared to his team, his voice a low, determined growl. "We have come too far. The people have placed their faith in me, in us, and I will not betray that trust. We will expose this plot, just as we did the last. And in doing so, we will send an unmistakable message. Africa's leaders must stand united for their people, not against them in servitude to external puppeteers." His security and intelligence teams moved with swift precision, meticulously gathering evidence of foreign complicity and tracing the network of internal collaborators. It was a high-stakes operation, demanding both speed and utmost discretion. As the investigation deepened, a critical warning reached Traoré through a trusted contact in South Africa. The message was chillingly clear. The coup plotters were in their final stages of preparation, intending to strike within days. They had allegedly compromised several high-ranking officials within Burkina Faso's own governmental and military structures, individuals who had remained loyal to the old, corrupt systems. Time was rapidly running out. Traoré convened an emergency meeting with his core allies, including the ever-reliable Commander Diarra. Together, they formulated a multi-pronged strategy to preempt and neutralize the coup. This was about more than just preserving his presidency. It was about safeguarding the very future of Burkina Faso, and, by extension, the burgeoning hope for a more sovereign African continent. Under Traoré's direct command, the counterplan was set into motion. Key loyalist units within the security forces moved discreetly to secure strategic locations and apprehend the identified conspirators. Simultaneously, the government prepared a comprehensive public statement, not just condemning the plot, but meticulously detailing the evidence of foreign interference in Burkina Faso's sovereign affairs. The message to the world and to his own people was unequivocal. Burkina Faso would not be swayed by external coercion, and its independence was non-negotiable. On what was to be the eve of the conspirators' intended strike, President Ibrahim Traoré stood before the nation, his voice broadcast across the airwaves, his image projected in town squares where anxious citizens had gathered. "My beloved people of Burkina Faso," he began, his voice calm yet resonating with an undeniable power. "The enemies of our nation, those who fear our unity and our progress, have once again tried to extinguish the flame of our hope. They have tried to plunge us back into darkness and dependency, but they have gravely underestimated the strength, the resilience, the spirit of the Burkinabe people." A roar of affirmation rose from the crowds. "We will not be silenced," Traoré continued, his fist clenched. "We will not be divided. We will not be dictated to. We stand united, one people, one nation, with one destiny that we shall forge with our own hands. Together, we will continue to build the future we deserve, a future of dignity, prosperity, and true freedom." His words ignited a firestorm of patriotic fervor. The people of Burkina Faso, who had endured so much and had so recently tasted the bitterness of internal betrayal, rallied behind their leader with an outpouring of support that stunned even his closest aides. The plot to overthrow Ibrahim Traoré crumbled before it could fully materialize, its architects exposed and apprehended. The immediate threat had been averted, but the struggle for Burkina Faso's soul, and indeed for Africa's true liberation, was far from over. Traoré knew that foreign powers, corrupt local elites, and all those who profited from Africa's continued subjugation would never cease their machinations. Yet, he had proven, time and again, his unyielding commitment to his people and their sovereign future. His leadership, tempered in the crucible of betrayal and adversity, had become a potent symbol of hope, not just for Burkina Faso, but for an entire continent yearning to break free from the shackles of its past. Days later, while visiting a rural village to inspect a new irrigation project spearheaded by repatriated agronomists, an elderly farmer, his face a roadmap of hardship and wisdom, approached President Traoré. Tears welled in the old man's eyes as he grasped Traoré's hand. "Mr. President," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I have lived through many seasons, seen many leaders come and go, heard countless empty promises. But in you, in the work you are doing, in the eyes of these young people you have brought back to us, we finally see tangible hope. You speak of a future where our children do not have to abandon their homeland to merely survive. I confess I did not believe such a future was possible for us, not in my lifetime, but you, son, you are making it real." Traoré felt a profound sense of humility. "It is you, Father, and people like you across our land, who give me the strength to continue this fight," he replied softly. "It is your resilience, your enduring faith, that fuels our collective journey." Political opposition, often amplified by external detractors, continued to voice its dissent in the capital. But President Traoré, his resolve fortified by the unwavering support of the masses and the visible transformation sweeping his nation, remained undeterred. He knew his path was righteous. In a landmark address before a massive gathering in the heart of Ouagadougou, an address that resonated across Africa and beyond, Ibrahim Traoré laid out his vision with uncompromising clarity. "My friends, my brothers and sisters, people of Burkina Faso, people of Africa," his voice boomed. "We are not here today to ask for the world's permission to exist, to prosper, to determine our own destiny. We are here to boldly claim what is rightfully ours. For too long, Africa has been a chessboard for global powers, its people pawns, its resources plundered. But that era is over. We will not be manipulated. We will not be exploited. We will build our future ourselves, with our own hands, our own intellect, our own sweat, and our own inexhaustible strength. Burkina Faso will rise, Africa will rise, and we will rise together, in dignity and unwavering solidarity." The crowd erupted, a tidal wave of sound, a testament to a people awakened, a continent stirring. The young men and women who had returned, once symbols of a brain drain, were now the vibrant architects of a national renaissance, their success a living embodiment of Traoré's faith in his people. The journey was arduous, the path ahead still fraught with challenges, but the direction was set. Under Ibrahim Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso was not just rebuilding, it was being reborn, a beacon of hope in the long and arduous struggle for a truly free and self-determined Africa. The future was no longer a distant dream. It was a demanding, exhilarating reality they were constructing, day by determined day.